Very good afternoon, and thanks for clicking on to the Thursday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. Before we continue with the video, be sure to hit that like button, share with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. I do greatly appreciate that. And also, before we continue with the video, I wanted to give you a slight update on what's going on through the remainder of the week and into the weekend. I just want to say that I will not have a live stream this upcoming Sunday. My wife and I are away at a concert down in Edinburgh this weekend, and I was going to do a live stream later on in the day after coming up from Edinburgh, and then I kind of thought about it. I spoke to her a little bit as well, and they said, "Do you really want to rush up the road? We'll probably have to get groceries and things like that on the way back up on Sunday." And I thought it's going to be a bit of a rush, so to compensate for the no live stream, there will be an uploaded global weather report. So there will be a video on Sunday, but it won't be the live stream, I'm afraid. I thought it's probably best that I just don't rush the whole weekend, just in anticipation of the live. So I've postponed that for this weekend, and it will be back as normal next weekend. So I just wanted to give you a little update on that. I should hopefully have a tropical outlook on Saturday, but I will in the next day or so touch on the fact that we had the development of Storm Alberto in the western Gulf of Mexico. That is continuing to drive heavy rain into Mexico. That is the Atlantic hurricane season 2024's first named storm officially. And we're going to be talking all things Europe in a second, but I wanted to also show you this GFS 200 millibar velocity potential anomaly chart here, because this is quite interesting to see. With regards to the Indian monsoon, it looks as if we are going to start to shake things up a little bit as we start to see more upward motion. The greens represent upward motion or rising air. The oranges and the yellowy colors represent, really orange, isn't it? Represent sinking within the atmosphere. And you notice two clear standout areas, not a huge strong MJO signal at the moment here, but we do have an active phase over Southeast Asia, the eastern side of the Indian Ocean. We should start to see that deeper green push more towards the Indian subcontinent over the next several days through the weekend and into next week, and that should start to pull the monsoon trough a little bit further north over India, and hopefully calming heat down across the far north of India into Pakistan, where we've still seen ongoing exceptional heat conditions, which is not unusual to see exceptional heat into the latter half of June. Sometimes it takes you well into July to actually see the rains move further north into more northern areas of the country. But also the other standout area is this here, right over Central America. We've got a little bit of a dartboard of rising air that has been helping enhance the rains triggered by the Central American gyre. That has been kind of throwing moisture, throwing a rather elongated, stretched out area of low pressure to continue driving moisture into eastern Mexico, into South Texas, and through the Central America region. We've seen some tremendous amount of rains in recent times in this part of the world. And like I said, I will actually try and do a tropical outlook. I may actually have one later this evening looking specifically at the tropics, because there is things to speak about here. But notice here as we play through the sequence that we start to see the greens eventually. So you notice here that the darker greens are now starting to pull further westwards over towards the Indian subcontinent. That should start to increase the rains here, and we will also start to see the Atlantic easing off as we move towards the latter half of this month and into early July. You notice here that we're starting to see the greens replaced by oranges, and that means that we should start to shut down the Atlantic. So it's been rather seasonal in terms of the Western Caribbean, Western Gulf, Central America region in recent times with heavy rainfall. That is typically the traditional areas of the world that you would typically see early season development. In other words, June development. You don't typically see things happening within the Atlantic until later down the road here. This is a bit of a tropical outlook, I suppose, really. But notice here that we've got a more amplified MJO signal with rising over the Indian Ocean and the Central and Western Pacific, we've got large-scale sinking over the East Pacific, over the Americas, and over the Atlantic. So therefore, we should start to see the West Pacific liven up with typhoons and activity. We should start to see more in the way of the monsoon progressing northwards over Asia as well. We've got more pulses of green representing rising over Australia, South Indian Ocean, etc. We should start to see more in the way of weather conditions developing here, and quite the opposite over the Americas and over the Atlantic here. But I want to also point something out here that's really interesting, is the jet stream. And we've obviously got a situation now developing that is very, very different to what we've seen through the month of May so far. I want to get into the details in just a second, but I wanted to point this out to you. Notice here, as we start to see the high over North America shift eastward, we've had tremendous heat across the Great Lakes, the upper Midwest, into the Northeast, into the New England, into eastern portions of Canada, where we've had record-breaking monthly, daily, monthly, and all-time records falling in parts of Ontario and Quebec in recent times. Look at how far north the jet is now. But notice here, with cold air to the north, very hot air to the south, we're then starting to reinvigorate the jet. We've seen that over the Pacific. We're seeing that now over the Atlantic. And what that's doing is pulling the jet, flattening it out, and instead of having a lot of meridional or amplified jet where you've got this big buckling, big troughs getting driven south into the subtropics, for example, we've got highs that are getting lifted way up into the north. We've seen that through the middle and second half of spring and into the early portions of summer, a very blocked up type of weather pattern. We've seen a significant change taking place in recent times where we've lost the blocking within the high latitudes. We're starting to see low pressure now and troughiness develop over Greenland in association with these changes taking place over the Pacific, over North America, and now over the Atlantic. And that is then in turn allowing the jet to lift north of the UK and the high pressure from the Azores to then move into the UK and Ireland. We've not seen this type of pattern really this year so far, but it's all about the movement of air starting off in the Pacific and now ending up in our part of the world here. So you notice here the strong jet here exiting eastern North America, and then as you notice, we've got quite a strong core of jet stream winds crossing over the Atlantic. Notice this little kink, this little dip in the jet as it exits Newfoundland and Labrador. That is important because we've got another strong channel of jet stream winds just to the northwestern side of the UK here. So we're seeing the changes, the evolution of change in this simple jet stream chart here. Notice how flat the jet is, extending all the way around the northern hemisphere. We've almost got a straight line of jet stream winds, and therefore we're seeing that classic positive Arctic oscillation, positive North Atlantic oscillation pattern. Notice here that we're starting to see the classic uniform low pressure over high pressure, something we just simply have not seen in recent times. So there's a conga line of lows extending from Alaska all the way to the north of the UK here, with a strong jet in between the high over the subtropics, low pressure over Greenland and over the high latitude here. So this is your textbook, essentially, heat wave pattern for both North America and for Europe here, with the jet in this situation. Now notice here something. We've got another core of strong jet stream winds. This is late upcoming weekend. We've got this jet. Now, I mentioned that little kink in the jet as it's exiting eastern Canada. Notice here that it's becoming more amplified as it moves into the North Atlantic. We're actually seeing the development of a low pressure system over the central North Atlantic. As it does so, it's then pulling the high northwards up into the UK and Ireland, and therefore we've got warm summer-like conditions here in the UK. How warm are we likely to get? Wouldn't be surprised if we see a 25 or 26 somewhere in Highland Scotland, possibly the mid-20s in the Central Belt, and further south, widespread mid to high 20s with an approach on 28, 29 Celsius. Do we hit 30 Celsius before the end of June? That remains to be seen. But you notice here, there's that kink becoming a lot more amplified here we've got this trough now starting to dig in over the North Atlantic, and therefore you're building the heights over the UK, over Ireland, and over Western Europe. So as we look at the chart of the ECMWF, let's see the 850 temperature profile changing here. Let's actually have a better look. Sorry, just bear with me a quick second here. So these are the 850s over the Atlantic Basin here, and you can see the evolution of change in the 850 millibar temperature profile here, because this is quite interesting to see. It would certainly help if the chart can, it would certainly help if we can get the right chart for one. There we go. So there's the contrast over Eastern North America at the moment here, feeding that strong jet in between here. And remember what I showed you in the global scale, we're seeing that flattening out of the jet here. And as a consequence, we are seeing the Arctic oscillation going firmly positive. There's that positive Arctic oscillation. What does that correlate to? A trough over the Arctic region, over the North Atlantic. If you look at the NAO, it too is going firmly into positive territory. So there is your classic ridging pattern over Eastern North America, across the Atlantic, and into the UK, Ireland, and Europe. When you've got the opposite, which we did see back, during the month of May, we had the opposite situation blocking across the top, troughiness underneath here. So we're turning the overall hemispheric pattern on its head, which is just quite fascinating to see the changes taking place. So as we play through this loop, you notice here that we've got this very hot air to the south, cold air to the north, jet in between. Then it's as we push in through the course of the weekend, there's that little dip. Remember, this would be the jet stream here in between the demarcation zone between the conflicting air masses here. It's as we see that dip taking place over the North Atlantic that we start to see this warmth getting advected northwards. There's an area of low pressure here that's deepening as a consequence of both the cold of the north and the very warm, humid air to the south. As that area of low pressure deepens, it's essentially pulling the heat out of the southwest of the continent up into the UK. Now, as we continue to play through here, watch what happens. We've got higher pressure starting to build to the east and northeast of the UK. This is into early next week. And what that might do is it may start to allow the orientation of the jet to become a lot more amplified once again. An arm digs southwards to the south of the UK. Then we've got another arm that's kind of lifting away up to the north. And we've got an area of low pressure where the air is forced to pile up. As you build high pressure to the east, you then slow down the eastward progress of low pressure. It kind of bundles the air, so it kind of forces it to then kind of wrap around itself, so to speak. Not tropical as such, but it's a baroclinic process. It forces the air, which has got essentially nowhere to go, so it kind of wraps around itself. And then what that's going to do is it's going to pull hot, humid air from the near continent, from the central portions of Europe, even from the Mediterranean, up into the UK from the southeast during the course of next week. And there's quite a lot of model agreement on that solution taking place. And what that is also going to do is continue to trigger showers and thunderstorms over the continent. So as we look at the European view of this here, you can see what I'm talking about here. Let's go back actually for a split second, and let's have a look at the geopotential height anomalies here, because this is quite interesting to see. Just bear with me a second here, folks. So here's the 500 millibar. We'll look at this here first and play through the loop. So you notice the deepening of the trough over the North Atlantic. There's the region to the south, then extending this way up into the UK and Ireland pattern. But watch what happens as we start to see this high pressure building to the east of the UK. It's then forcing the deepening of an area of low pressure near Ireland. This is the middle portions of next week. This may be quite a thundery, hot and humid scenario for the UK here. This is one model run of hundreds of model runs, so we obviously have to kind of take this somewhat with a pinch of salt. But notice here it kind of becomes cut off, divorced from the main pressure pattern here, and it may become somewhat stuck in place. But what this is going to essentially start to do with high pressure in the north, area of low pressure near the UK. We can't take this quite as literal as the actual raw model data, but what we could expect to see is an area of low pressure nearby with higher pressure surrounding it. And what that is essentially going to start to do is it's going to start to draw hot, humid air from the continent up towards the UK, and then we need to kind of see this scenario unfold. Let's have a look at the GFS and see what it's showing with regards to that feature here. So we'll play through the loop, deep into the trough of the North Atlantic, pulling the ridge up into the UK and Ireland. Warm and humid conditions. Notice here the trough within the GFS model indicates that it digs further south to the west of the UK and Ireland and allows more of a southerly wind to develop. If we look at the 850 temperatures, you can see here the type of air mass that we're looking at. Nothing major, but notice here that as we play through this loop, there is warmer air getting drafted out of the central Mediterranean up towards the UK and Ireland, with that cold air dragging south, dipping south. So quite a dynamic situation developing as we progress through the course of next week. Let's go back to the 500 millibar of the GFS chart here and see where it's having that area of low pressure. So we play through the loop, it drops south. Notice here, instead of it being over the northern UK, it's actually to the west near Ireland on the GFS model here. So remember, the positioning of this low could be quite critical. If it's slightly further east, you're probably not importing that hot, humid air from the central continent. If it's further west, you're likely to be pulling it into the UK. And as we've got this feature in place, you're likely to see showers, thunderstorms, and potential flood and rains from this kind of dynamic situation as well. So that is something that we need to watch. But certainly a very, very fascinating type of pattern setting up. If you are interested in all things weather, if you're interested in understanding the evolution behind the pattern, looking at its origins all the way back to the tropics within the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, right to the point where we get in the weather itself, this is hopefully the channel for you. Hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate your support. So very, very interesting situation developing here. Let's go back to the overview chart over the GFS and you can see what's taking place. Lots of showers, thunderstorms over northern Iberia, France, central areas of Europe. The SFX chart here is indicating the active severe weather pattern continues across Europe. The highest risk of severe thunderstorms this forecast is across the northern Alps, with threats of very large hail, severe winds, and damaging gusts. So you can see here that the biggest threat is over parts of the Alpine region, but these two areas here are highlighted for severe thunderstorms, flash flooding, damaging wind, and large hail. It's over the western mainland of Europe and over the far east of Europe. You notice here, this is the areas that we need to watch. And obviously, we've probably quite a lot of us been watching the Euros in recent days, and there has been times where there's been flooding in parts of Germany, and that has been the case ongoing through the second half of the spring and into the first half of the summer season. It has been a very, very stormy pattern across much of Central Europe as a consequence. So we'll watch and see what happens with regards to the evolution. This is the Cape values, by the way. This is the level of instability within the atmosphere, and you can see that over northern Iberia, across France, into the central areas of Europe. We've got these flare-ups of strong to severe thunderstorms here. So that is going to continue to be an issue probably for the European Championships ongoing in Germany. So we'll need to keep a close eye on that in the coming days to come. So let's have a look and see what else we can look at in terms of heavy precipitation. You notice that we do have, if we look at the animation here, very, very heavy intense rainfall over the southeast of Asia. We're starting to get it into more of India as well. We've got the typical equatorial regions of Africa seeing some heavy rainfall at the moment. Not a huge amount over Australia, if you notice. We've also got that area of upward motion over the central region of the Americas. So we've obviously got very intense rainfall here. We've got a potential for a secondary system developing actually over the Bay of Campeche in the western Gulf of Mexico. But you also notice something. This is what I want to show you. Notice the orientation of heavy rains. over the Pacific and over the Atlantic. With that positive AO NAO signal, we're seeing the jet and transport of moisture going northeastwards into the northwest of North America here, with the strong ridge over the eastern side of North America. We're seeing that transport of moisture into the northwest of North America. And equally so, we're seeing the same thing over the Atlantic. With the jet being further north, reasonably strong, we're seeing a lot of moisture being evicted from Western Atlantic over the top of that ridge and to the generally to the north of the UK. So I thought that was quite interesting to show you in general. And let's have a look at the CFSV2 weeklies here for week 1 and week 2 and see what they are showing. So just bear with me a little second here. This is for Europe. Week 1 precipitation, drier than average. Week 2, it starts to turn a little bit wetter than average. And the reason why is we've got a feature seen by the models, shown by the ECM and the GFS just a wee while ago, showing the chance of an area of low pressure nearby and likely slightly to the west or southwest of the UK during the course of next week. So this is the upcoming week. We've got a lot of high pressure in place. We've got a weak, not trough as such, but a weakness within the atmosphere over this region here, central and southern France, into northeastern Iberia, possibly into the western portions of the Mediterranean basin. This is where your thunderstorm activity is likely to be. Strongest ridge over the north of Europe and southeast of Europe, extensions into the UK. Now notice here week 2, there's that negative that I'm talking about. That's what I showed you in both the ECM and the GFS operational model here. The exact position remains to be seen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's further south and further southwest. That could be a thundery low pressure system, and feeding in hot humid air from the continent, we could see some quite explosive thunderstorms and flash flood potential during the course of next week. So we'll need to keep a close eye on that. And then week 3, 4th of July through the 11th of July, we've got higher pressure centered slightly to the west of the UK and Ireland. Let's have a quick look at the current radar. This is the latest here, not really showing an awful lot if you notice. This is the current temperatures across the UK and Ireland. So we've got some more warmth to speak about, more widespread, low 20s across England and Wales here, upper teens, knocking the door of 20 in a few spots across Scotland. We've got 22 Celsius, it looks like, around the Dublin area this afternoon, elsewhere mid to high teens. Looking at the continent as a whole, and this is how we are looking this afternoon. You can see here a decent amount of warmth across the continent, especially so across the southeast in general. That is where the hottest conditions are this afternoon. Let me see what else I can show you here before I finish things off. By the way, this is an interesting one. GFS extended for the next 30 days, upper air heights. So notice here the classic positive NAO signal here, with a lot of ridging over North America, a lot of ridging over Europe here as well, with a deep trough over Greenland and over the North Atlantic. That would certainly be a warmer, drier overall period between the 19th of June and the 19th of July. So it's indicating the rest of June and the majority of the first half of July is actually seeing that positive NAO signal, which would constitute more likely higher pressure and warmer than average temperatures for both North America and for the UK, Europe as well, and Ireland. Let's not forget our folks in Ireland as well. So yeah, very, very interesting times certainly to come. This is the latest radar image here of Meteosil, showing plenty of convection over northern portions of Iberia at the moment. We had an area of low pressure just to the west. Notice here it's now moved into the central portions of Spain, and it's what it's doing is it's feeding moisture out of the western portions of the Mediterranean and driving plenty of showers and thunderstorms up through France, Low Countries, Germany as well. So probably see more downpours in parts of Germany, central areas of Europe as well. Quite an active pattern at the moment here. So have I forgotten anything else? No. In terms of how warm temperatures are going to get, I think as we move towards the weekend, we're talking about the at least mid-20s, possibly 26, 27 in parts of the south of the UK. Further north, 23, 24, possibly 25 Celsius is possible in the coming days. And we'll look at the details in terms of temperature in the coming days to come, so stay tuned for that. Like, share, and subscribe. See you tomorrow with hopefully more. Bye for now.